I was elbow deep in porcelain dust when my phone buzzed against the metal workbench. Another text, the fifth one this hour from clients anxious about their precious family heirlooms. But as I wiped my hands on my apron and squinted at the screen, my stomach dropped. We need to talk. Actually, no, we don't. It's over. 6 years. Done. Your stuff is in boxes by the door. Just like that, Emma had ended us through a damn text message, as if I were some casual hookup she'd met last weekend. My hands trembled as I set down the Song Dynasty teacup I'd been painstakingly restoring. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could fix priceless ceramics shattered into 100 pieces, but my relationship had just crumbled beyond repair. Brooke? You still with me? My assistant's voice barely registered from the front of the studio. I need a minute, I managed, the words scraping against my suddenly dry throat. I locked myself in the bathroom, slid down against the cool tile wall, and stared at the message until the letters blurred together. 6 years. 6 goddamn years of building a life with someone, and it ended in 23 words. Not even a proper sentence count for each year we'd spent together. The next 3 days passed in a fog. I botched a simple restoration job that I could normally do in my sleep, dropped a client's Victorian figurine, called my assistant by my ex's name twice, when I nearly applied epoxy to the wrong fragment of a Ming vase worth more than my annual income. I knew I had to do something drastic. That night, hunched over my laptop with a glass of wine that had long since warmed to room temperature, I found myself scrolling through spiritual retreat options. Not my usual scene, I was more science than spirit, but the idea of structured escape held appeal. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I wouldn't be surrounded by fragile things I could destroy. Ancient Wisdom Retreat. Rediscover your center in historic Austin, the website announced in serene blue font. A former monastery converted into a meditation center. No phones, no outside contact, just meditation, hiking, and healing for 2 full weeks. This is insane, I muttered, even as I entered my credit card information. The confirmation email arrived seconds later, along with instructions to arrive at the retreat center in 3 days. I spent those days in a flurry of activity, arranging for my assistant to handle ongoing projects, emailing clients about delays, and packing with the haphazard energy of someone fleeing a crime scene. I told no one where I was really going. Personal emergency became my mantra. In a way, it wasn't a lie. The drive to Austin took longer than expected, my GPS leading me through winding roads that seemed to deliberately avoid civilization. When I finally pulled up to the stone entrance of the former monastery, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the courtyard. You must be Brooke Torres, a woman with silver-streaked hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had transcended everyday concerns greeted me. Her name tag read, Director Lillian. We were beginning to wonder if you'd changed your mind. Traffic, I lied, not wanting to admit I'd pulled over twice to reconsider this whole plan. The evening meditation begins in 20 minutes. I'll show you to your room so you can settle in quickly. My room was a cell-like space with a single bed, a small desk, and a window overlooking what appeared to be an herb garden. No TV, no minibar, not even a damn clock. Just white walls, wooden floors, and a sense of overwhelming silence. As I changed into the recommended comfortable, loose-fitting clothes which made everyone look like extras in a cult documentary, I caught sight of my reflection. Red hair wild from the car ride, green eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and the unmistakable look of someone who had no business being here. What did I know about meditation? About spiritual healing? I fixed broken objects, not broken hearts. The meditation hall was already filling with people when I arrived, about 20 others, all with the same lost look I recognized from my own reflection, though some hid it better than others. I took a cushion near the back, hoping to remain unnoticed. First time? The voice came from my left, low, slightly husky, with a hint of amusement. I turned to find a woman about my age settling onto the adjacent cushion, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, striking blue eyes, and an expression that suggested she found something vaguely entertaining about all of this. Is it that obvious? I whispered back. You're still wearing your watch, she pointed out. And you keep checking your phone, which I'm guessing still has service because you haven't surrendered it yet. I felt my cheeks flush as I removed my watch and silenced my phone. I began, but was cut off by the entrance of the meditation leader and the sound of a gong that seemed to reverberate through my very bones. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Close your eyes, empty your mind, let go of all attachments. The meditation leader's voice floated through the incense-heavy air, while I sat cross-legged, back screaming, wondering how anyone found this comfortable. 20 minutes in, my legs had gone numb, my mind racing through every detail of Emma's text message instead of emptying. The harder I tried to focus on my breath, the more persistently my thoughts circled back to the boxes of my stuff sitting by her door. When the instructor softly encouraged us to release the tension in your jaw, I realized I was clenching my teeth so hard I might need dental work. The blonde woman beside me seemed perfectly at ease, her breathing steady, face serene. Now gently returned to the present moment with a deep cleansing breath, the instructor finally said. I exhaled so forcefully that several people turned to look, including her, the blonde with the knowing smirk. That was just the welcome session, she whispered as we filed out. Tomorrow we do 45 minutes. During the evening meal, a vegetarian affair that made me long for a cheeseburger, I found myself seated at a communal table across from her. Alyssa White, she said, extending her hand. Archaeologist. First-timer like you, but I've done fieldwork meditation in remote locations. Brooke Torres, I replied, noticing her firm handshake. Ceramic restoration specialist, and meditation virgin obviously. Her eyebrow quirked at my choice of words, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. So you fix broken things, she said, taking a bite of her quinoa whatever it was. I try to. Some things can't be fixed though. The words came out more bitter than intended. Ah. Recent breakup? Alyssa's directness caught me off guard. 6 years. Ended by text message 3 days ago. She winced sympathetically. That's cold. Before I could respond, Director Lillian clinked her glass, announcing the evening's activity, a sharing circle where we would each reveal what brought us here. When my turn came, I mumbled something about seeking balance. Alyssa, however, spoke with surprising candor about ending an 8-year relationship with her research partner 6 months ago. She chose tenure over me, she said simply. No self-pity, just fact. Later, in my sparse room, I found myself wondering about Alyssa, rather than obsessing over Emma for the first time in days, the casual way she'd mentioned she when referring to her ex, the confident set of her shoulders, the intelligent sharpness in her blue eyes. The next morning's meditation session was a disaster. The instructor asked us to focus on our breathing while visualizing healing light. Instead, I kept seeing Emma packing my books into boxes, tossing aside 6 years like forgotten leftovers. My foot began to tap, then my fingers drummed against my knee. By minute 30 I was practically vibrating. If you're struggling with stillness, the instructor called out, clearly meaning me, try focusing on a fixed point. I tried. God help me, I tried. But 5 minutes later, I erupted from my cushion with a strangled sound between a sob and a laugh, stumbling out of the hall as all eyes followed me. Outside in the garden, I paced furiously, muttering about wasted money and new age bullshit. First day's always the hardest. I spun around to find Alyssa leaning against a stone wall, arms crossed. Shouldn't you be in there achieving nirvana or whatever? I snapped. I'm a solidarity deserter. She grinned. Besides, I've found traditional meditation doesn't work for everyone. You don't say. Walk with me. It wasn't a question, but I found myself falling into step beside her. Meditation isn't just sitting still looking constipated. It's about finding your center. My center's currently occupied by rage and humiliation, I admitted. Perfect starting point, she said, leading me to a small stream that ran through the property. Watch the water and tell me what you see. Water, rocks, some bugs. Details, Brooke. You restore ceramics. You notice details. She was right. I studied the water, how it curved around obstacles, relentless yet flexible. It doesn't fight the rocks, I observed. It just finds another way. Traditional meditation asks you to empty your mind. I find it more effective to fill it with something else entirely. Focus on one thing so completely that everything else fades. Under her guidance, I spent 20 minutes observing that stream, the way sunlight fractured on its surface, the miniature whirlpools forming around twigs, the precise shade of moss on the stones. How do you know all this? I asked when we finally turned back. Excavating for hours in silence teaches you to work with your mind, not against it. She paused. Or you go insane from boredom. That evening, when the instructor announced paired exercises for the next day, Alyssa caught my eye across the room. Somehow, despite barely knowing her, I felt relief when director Lillian assigned us as partners. Lucky you, Alyssa said later as we strolled the grounds under a star-filled sky. You get the benefit of my extensive experience in not losing my shit during quiet time. For the first time since Emma's text, I laughed genuinely. Is that going on your business card? Dr. Alyssa White, PhD, professional non-shit loser? Better than Brooke Torres, meditation disruptor. Our laughter echoed across the courtyard, earning disapproving looks from more committed retreat participants. But as we parted ways for the night, something in my chest felt lighter, as though hairline fractures had begun to seal. The physical world reveals our inner truths, Director Lillian announced on our 5th day. Today's hike will connect you with nature and each other. I wasn't sure how a walk would fix my broken heart, but I'd come to trust Alyssa's judgment enough to give it a chance. We paired off naturally, falling into step along the wooded trail behind the monastery. So what's the most valuable thing you've ever restored? Alyssa asked as we climbed a gentle slope. Monetarily? A Kangxi period vase worth about $2 million. She let out a low whistle. And personally? I considered this. My grandmother's tea set. Nothing special to anyone else, mass-produced 1,952nd ceramic. But she used it for our Sunday afternoon teas. When my mother accidentally broke it after Grandma died, I taught myself restoration techniques just to fix it. That's how you got started? Complete accident. Now I have clients worldwide sending me their precious broken treasures. I glanced at her. What about you? Most significant dig? Professionally? A previously undocumented Etruscan pottery workshop near Tarquinia. Her eyes lit up as she described the ancient kiln they'd uncovered. Unlike most people who asked about my work out of politeness, Alyssa's interest seemed genuine. We veered off the marked trail, following a deer path that curved along a stream, the same one where she'd taught me her meditation technique. Hold up, Alyssa suddenly stopped, crouching down. Look. Partially buried in the eroded stream bank was what appeared to be a pottery shard, its glazed surface catching the sunlight. Native American? I asked, kneeling beside her. Maybe Spanish colonial. The glaze pattern is interesting. She carefully extracted the piece from the mud. What do you think? I took it gently, years of training making me hyper-aware of its fragility. Majolica technique, but cruder than European examples. Probably local adaptation of Spanish methods early 1800s. Alyssa studied me with new interest. You're good. Most people wouldn't recognize that. Most people haven't spent 20 years staring at pottery fragments. She laughed. Touché. We examined the piece together, heads bent close, discussing clay composition and firing techniques. Our knees touched in the damp earth and neither of us moved away. We should document where we found this, she said, pulling out a small notepad. The retreat center might be built over an archaeological site. I helped her mark the coordinates and sketch the location. The entire process was strangely intimate, our professional shorthand creating a language only we understood. You should come to my next dig, she said suddenly. Your restoration perspective would be valuable. The idea of seeing Alyssa beyond these monastery walls sent an unexpected thrill through me. Before I could respond, thunder rumbled in the distance. We better head back, she said, carefully wrapping the pottery shard in a bandana from her pocket. Austin storms come fast. We barely made it halfway to the retreat when the sky opened up. Rain drenched us within seconds as we ran, laughing, for shelter. By the time we reached the covered porch, my clothes clung to my skin, and Alyssa's blonde hair had darkened to honey. Your eyes are incredible in this light, she said suddenly, reaching out to brush a wet strand of hair from my face. Her fingers lingered against my cheek a moment longer than necessary. That evening, during the authentic sharing session, I found myself opening up about Emma's text message breakup. The group sat in a circle, passing a talking stick that gave each person uninterrupted speaking time. 6 years together, and she couldn't even call me, I said, surprised by my steady voice. The worst part wasn't losing her. It was realizing I'd been losing her for months and pretending not to notice. When I passed the stick to the next person, I caught Alyssa's gaze across the circle. The understanding in her eyes made my throat tighten. Later, we found ourselves alone in the retreat's garden. Night-blooming jasmine scented the air as stars emerged overhead. My ex left me for a tenured position in Switzerland, Alyssa said, continuing our earlier conversation. 8 years together, and she didn't even ask if I wanted to go with her. Would you have gone? That's the thing. I might have. But she made the decision for both of us. We sat in comfortable silence, shoulders barely touching on the narrow bench. It gets better, she said finally. The ache. It doesn't disappear, but it changes. Less raw, more instructive. Like an archaeological layer? I suggested. She smiled. Exactly like that. Evidence of who we were, not who we are now. When she turned to face me, moonlight silvered her profile. Her hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining naturally. Brooke, she said softly, leaning closer. My pulse quickened as the distance between us narrowed. Her lips, just inches from mine, parted slightly. The air between us seemed charged with possibility. Then Director Lillian's voice cut through the garden, announcing evening meditation. The moment suspended, fragile as ancient pottery, neither of us willing to break it by pulling away. To be continued, Alyssa whispered, her breath warm against my lips before she stood, tugging me toward the meditation hall. I followed, aware that something fundamental had shifted, like a broken piece finally finding where it belonged. You're evading the question, I said, sprawled across Alyssa's bed as she sorted through a manila folder of photographs. We'd taken to spending evenings in each other's rooms, bending the retreat's personal space guidelines without technically breaking them. I'm not evading. I'm considering, she replied, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Favorite archaeological period is like asking a parent to choose a favorite child. Yet parents do it all the time, they just don't admit it. She laughed, conceding the point. Fine, early Byzantine transitional pottery, the period when Roman influence was giving way to distinctly Byzantine aesthetics. It's messy, authentic. You can see the struggle of identity in every piece. I propped myself up on an elbow, watching her arrange photos in neat rows. What are these? My current research project, ancient pottery manufacturing techniques in southern Spain. She hesitated before adding, I've been comparing glaze compositions across centuries. I moved closer, examining a photograph of a shattered amphora. The restoration on this is terrible. Look how they've misaligned the joining fragments. That's what I've been saying. The conservation team has no experience with ceramic antiquities. She sat beside me, our shoulders touching. This whole collection needs proper restoration before I can complete my analysis. I could help, I offered, surprising myself with how much I wanted an excuse to stay connected to her after the retreat ended. She looked at me with genuine excitement. Are you serious? That would be incredible. I've worked with museum collections before. This looks fascinating. For the next hour, we huddled together over her research photos, my restoration expertise complementing her archaeological knowledge so perfectly it felt choreographed. When Director Lillian knocked on the door for bed check, we jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Trust exercises tomorrow, Alyssa whispered as I slipped past Lillian with a mumbled excuse about borrowing books. Partners again? I nodded, unable to suppress my smile. The next morning we gathered in the meditation hall where the cushions had been pushed aside, creating an open space. Today we practice vulnerability and trust, Director Lillian announced. Each pair will take turns guiding their blindfolded partner through the space, using only verbal cues. When my turn came to be blindfolded, Alyssa's voice became my entire world. 2 steps forward, she directed, her tone calm and assured. Now slightly left. Good. Extend your hand. I followed her instructions perfectly, avoiding obstacles other pairs stumbled into. When we switched roles, our performance was even better, almost as if we could read each other's minds. Remarkable synchronicity, Director Lillian commented. You two have developed a strong connection. Later that afternoon, dark clouds rolled in, bringing another Texas thunderstorm. The electricity flickered once, twice, then plunged the entire retreat into darkness. Everyone remained calm, Director Lillian called out as lightning illuminated the common room in staccato flashes. The generator should activate momentarily. Want to see something cool? Alyssa whispered, taking my hand. The library has the best view of the storm. We slipped away, navigating shadowy corridors until we reached the small library overlooking the valley. Rain lashed against floor-to-ceiling windows as lightning split the sky. It's magnificent, I breathed, watching nature's display. Like watching the world being broken and remade. Alyssa stood so close I could feel the warmth of her body. You know what I think about sometimes? How the pottery we find, the broken pieces, they witness storms just like this. Centuries ago, someone else stood at a window, watching lightning, holding their breath between thunder. I turned to look at her, struck by the poetry in her observation. In the intermittent flashes of lightning, her face was all dramatic contrasts, high cheekbones, the curve of her lips, eyes reflecting the storm's fury. I've never thought about artifacts that way, I admitted. I focus on their damage, not their witness. That's why we make a good team. You see what needs healing. I see what needs remembering. When she turned toward me, something shifted in the air between us. Her hand reached up, tracing the outline of my jaw with hesitant fingers. I wasn't expecting you, she said softly. I wasn't expecting any of this, I replied, voice barely audible above the rain. The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable, like the final piece clicking into place in a complex restoration. Her lips were soft, tentative at first, then more certain. My hands found her waist as hers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. The storm outside matched the one within me, wild, electric, and impossible to contain. Pressed between the bookshelf and her body, I felt the careful walls I'd built crumbling away. Thunder shook the building as her hands slipped beneath my shirt, fingers tracing patterns across my skin that made coherent thought impossible. "Is this okay?" she whispered against my neck. "More than okay," I managed, guiding her hand higher. What followed was both gentle exploration and urgent need. Clothes partially discarded, bodies discovering each other in lightning-illuminated glimpses. Her skin tasted of salt and storm as I traced the constellation of freckles across her collarbone. When the light suddenly flickered back on, we froze, disheveled and breathless, before dissolving into laughter. "To be continued?" I whispered, echoing her words from the garden. "Definitely," she replied, pressing a final kiss to my lips as footsteps approached the library door. "Hold it at this angle," I instructed, guiding Alyssa's hands as she positioned her camera above the pottery fragment we'd found by the stream. "The raking light will highlight the texture details." We were sitting cross-legged on her bed, working together to properly document her find. The retreat was entering its second week, and we'd established a comfortable routine that revolved increasingly around each other. "Like this?" she asked, adjusting the angle slightly. "Perfect." I steadied her wrist, lingering longer than necessary. Ever since our encounter in the library during the storm, every touch between us felt charged with meaning. "Your expertise makes this documentation 10 times better," she said, reviewing the photos on her camera's display. "My usual field photos don't capture nearly as much detail. Restoration requires obsessive attention." I smiled, watching her methodical approach to the impromptu archaeology project. "You have to see what's missing to know how to fix it." "Is that your philosophy on heartbreak too?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about it that way, but maybe. Understanding the damage is the first step to repair. She set down her camera, looking at me with those piercing blue eyes. "And what damage did Emma do exactly?" No one had asked me so directly before. She made me believe I wasn't enough, that my passion for my work was somehow less important than hers. "Her loss," Alyssa said simply, touching my hand. "Your passion is captivating." The door to her room opened abruptly without a knock. "Sorry to interrupt," said Melanie, one of the more intense retreat participants. "Director Lillian is looking for everyone. Apparently, we're meant to be at group reflection right now." "We'll be right there," Alyssa replied, not moving, her eyes still locked with mine. Melanie lingered, her gaze traveling between us with poorly disguised interest. "You two have been spending a lot of time together." "Pottery research," I said, gesturing to the fragments in camera. Melanie's disbelief was evident. "Well, don't be too long. Director Lillian mentioned both your names specifically." After she left, Alyssa sighed. "I think we've become the subject of retreat gossip. Does that bother you?" She considered the question. "Not if it doesn't bother you." During group reflection, I noticed the sidelong glances, the whispers when Alyssa and I sat together. Most were merely curious, but Melanie's attention felt more calculating. Later, as we filled our plates at dinner, she approached. "Mind if I join you? I'd love to hear more about your pottery research." Alyssa glanced at me with a barely perceptible eye roll. "Of course." Throughout the meal, Melanie peppered us with questions about our professions, our backgrounds, and eventually the nature of our friendship. "It's just interesting, you know," she said, picking at her salad. You both came here to heal from breakups, and now you're practically inseparable. The retreat hasn't even ended yet. Professional interest, Alyssa said coolly. We share academic fascinations. Very academic, Melanie agreed with a knowing smile. Is that why you missed sunrise yoga? Academic pursuits? I felt heat rise to my cheeks, remembering exactly why we'd missed morning yoga, falling back asleep in Alyssa's bed after talking until dawn. After an uncomfortable silence, Alyssa excused us, guiding me away with a hand at the small of my back. She's jealous, Alyssa whispered, as we walked toward the garden for the evening meditation. I recognized her name when she first introduced herself. She's an adjunct professor who applied for the same grant I received last year. Small world, I murmured, distracted by the warmth of her hand against my back. That night, after everyone else had retired, we snuck out to the meditation labyrinth, a circular stone path designed for walking meditation. I understand why ancient people created sacred spaces, Alyssa said as we walked the spiraling path under moonlight. There's something about being removed from ordinary life that makes everything more intense. Is that what this is? I asked, suddenly insecure. An intensity that exists only in this sacred space? She stopped walking, turning to face me. Is that what you're worried about? That this is just some retreat fling? I hadn't realized that was exactly my fear until she named it. Maybe. We met at a vulnerable time. What happens when we go back to real life? Instead of answering, she kissed me, softly at first. Then with growing urgency as I responded. Her hands framed my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones with a tenderness that made my chest ache. Real life is where I do my best work, she whispered against my lips. This isn't about vulnerability or escapism. This is about finding something I wasn't looking for. We stood in the center of the labyrinth, the moon casting our single shadow across ancient stones. Just as she leaned in to kiss me again, a flashlight beam swept across the garden. Who's out there? Director Lillian's voice called. We froze for a moment before Alyssa grabbed my hand, pulling me silently toward the shadows of the nearby oak trees. Pressed against the rough bark, stifling laughter as Lillian investigated the empty labyrinth, I felt decades younger, reckless and alive. When Lillian finally retreated, Alyssa's mouth found mine again, hands slipping beneath my shirt with newfound boldness. Your room or mine? She whispered. Whichever is closer, I replied, already leading her back toward the dormitory building. I woke before dawn with Alyssa's arm draped across my waist, her steady breathing warm against my neck. For the first time since Emma's text, I felt no immediate pang of loss, just a strange, tentative contentment. You're thinking too loudly, Alyssa murmured, her voice husky with sleep. I turned to face her. In the pre-dawn light, her features were soft, vulnerable. Good thoughts, I assured her. Share them anyway. I was thinking how different you are from anyone I've ever been with. I traced the line of her collarbone with my finger. Emma was all about control and certainty. I'm what? She prompted when I hesitated. An exploration. An uncharted dig site. She smiled, catching my hand and bringing my fingers to her lips. That might be the most romantic thing an archaeologist could hear. After breakfast, we escaped the scheduled activities for a hike, just the two of us. The Texas hill country stretched before us, wildflowers painting the landscape in vivid yellows and purples. I've been thinking, I said as we reached a rocky overlook. When the retreat ends, I could come see your research site, maybe help properly document those pottery fragments. Alyssa's smile lit her entire face. I'd love that. My university lab isn't glamorous, but I don't need glamorous. I just need what? Time. To see if this, us, works in the real world. She pulled me into a kiss that answered more eloquently than words. When we finally separated, breathless, she rested her forehead against mine. This isn't just a retreat romance for me, Brooke. We hiked higher, eventually finding ourselves alone on a remote trail that wound among ancient oak trees. Without speaking, Alyssa took my hand, leading me to a sheltered clearing where sunlight dappled through leaves. What happened there felt like consecration, like creating something sacred in the wild. Her hands mapping my body as if committing every curve to memory, my mouth discovering places that made her gasp and arch beneath me. Afterward, we lay tangled together on her jacket, the Texas sky impossibly blue above us. I never do things like this, I confessed, watching clouds drift overhead. Like what? Outdoor adventures? Her teasing smile made me laugh. Like fall for someone so quickly. I'm usually cautious, methodical. Like your restoration work? Exactly. I propped myself up on one elbow, studying her face, taking time to examine every fragment, planning each step carefully. And now? Now I'm terrified and exhilarated and not overthinking for once in my life. Back at the retreat that afternoon, I was working through my resistance to group meditation when my phone, which I'd smuggled back from the surrender bin, vibrated in my pocket. I slipped out to check it, surprised to see a message from my assistant. Emergency. McAllister Voss cracked during shipping. Client threatening lawsuit. Need you ASAP. My stomach dropped. The McAllister piece, a museum-quality Qing Dynasty Voss, was irreplaceable and insured for millions. I quickly texted back that I'd handle it, then returned to meditation, my mind now racing with professional concerns. After the session, I found Alyssa in the library. I might have to leave early, I told her, showing the message. This could ruin my studio if not handled properly. She squeezed my hand. Of course you should go. When? Tomorrow, probably. I'll talk to Director Lillian. The disappointment on her face mirrored my own. We had just 3 days left of the retreat and I'd been counting on every minute. We'll figure it out, she promised. This doesn't change anything. That evening, as we walked the labyrinth together under stars, her phone rang, unusual, as most retreatants surrendered their devices. Alyssa stepped away to answer, her expression shifting from annoyance to shock. What is it? I asked when she returned, face pale in the moonlight. The Carmona site, she said, her voice tight with excitement. They found an intact kiln complex, possibly 3rd century BCE, perfectly preserved firing chambers, original tools, unfired clay still in place. That's amazing. They need me there, now. It's what my entire research has been building toward. She ran a hand through her hair, visibly torn. Brooke, You have to go, I finished for her. It's in Spain. I might have to fly out tomorrow. The coincidence of our simultaneous departures felt like some cosmic joke. So we both leave early, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. We'll just have to meet up afterward. Absolutely, she agreed quickly. Once you've handled your crisis and I've documented this find. We both fell silent, the unspoken question hanging between us. Would what we'd found here survive in the outside world? Later that night, in my narrow bed, Alyssa held me close as if memorizing the feeling. When her kiss deepened into something more urgent, I met her intensity with my own, trying to compress weeks of discovery into hours. Just before dawn, she slipped from my bed. I have to pack, she whispered. My flight leaves at noon. Call me when you land? Instead of answering, she kissed me with such passion it left me breathless. This isn't goodbye, she said fiercely. This is just intermission. By the time I woke again, she was gone. The remaining 2 days at the retreat dragged like centuries. I went through the motions, meditating, sharing, reflecting, but everything felt hollow without Alyssa. Several times I caught Melanie watching me with something between sympathy and satisfaction. Your friend left rather suddenly, she remarked during the final dinner. Archaeological emergency, I replied, not bothering to elaborate. And you're leaving tomorrow too? What a coincidence. I ignored her insinuation, focusing instead on the pottery fragment Alyssa had left on my pillow, our streambed discovery, now cleaned and carefully labeled with the coordinates where we'd found it. My return to Austin felt like stepping into someone else's life. The familiar smell of plaster and epoxy in my studio should have been comforting, but instead emphasized everything that had changed. I threw myself into salvaging the McAllister vase, working 18-hour days, waiting for a call from Spain that never came. After a week of silence, I finally texted her, landed safely, thinking of you. 3 days later, a response, safe but swamped, incredible find, will call soon. But soon stretched into another week, and another. Her social media showed photos of ancient kilns, pottery fragments, dusty archaeological trenches, but no personal messages. I told myself she was busy, that archaeological digs had notoriously bad connectivity, that international calling was complicated. The excuses piled up like pottery shards waiting for restoration. By the 3rd week, I had stopped checking my phone obsessively. By the 4th, I had convinced myself that what happened at the retreat had been exactly what I'd feared, a temporary escape from reality, not the beginning of something lasting. "You seem distracted," my assistant commented as I mixed the wrong pigment for the third time that morning. The retreat was supposed to help with that. "I'm fine," I lied, reaching for another batch of epoxy. "Just tired." That evening, alone in my apartment, I unpacked the last box of retreat belongings I'd been avoiding. Inside was the journal we'd been encouraged to keep, filled with my observations about meditation, healing, and page after page about Alyssa. Reading my own words about our connection felt like examining artifacts from a civilization that had suddenly vanished. I closed the journal and placed it on my bookshelf between technical manuals on ceramic restoration. Another fragment of a life I thought I was building. The McAllister vase took nearly a month to restore properly. When I finally delivered it to the relieved client, he insisted on celebrating with champagne. To second chances he toasted, admiring the now perfect piece. Some things can be saved after all. I smiled thinly, wondering why successful restorations no longer gave me the satisfaction they once had. Back at my studio, I was cleaning my workbench when the delivery service arrived with a package requiring signature. The return address was international, but not from Spain, from England. Inside was a small wooden box, carefully padded. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it to reveal an ancient pottery vessel, partially restored but with several pieces obviously missing or incorrectly placed. A note accompanied it. "Some projects require a specialist's touch. Coordinates enclosed." Beneath the vessel was a map with GPS coordinates marked in red, and a printed ticket to a location in West Texas. The departure date was 3 days away. I stared at the ticket, emotions warring between hope and hurt. Why now? Why this elaborate gesture instead of a simple phone call? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect myself from further disappointment. But the restorer in me couldn't ignore the broken vessel. I examined it carefully, recognizing it as a rare example of Iberian pottery, similar to fragments Alyssa had shown in her research photos. Some breaks were fresh, others ancient. The restoration attempt was amateur. Someone had clearly tried their best but lacked the technical skill to complete it properly. I spent the next 2 days preparing, both professionally and emotionally. I gathered my portable restoration kit, researched the coordinates, and tried to temper my expectations. The morning of departure, I nearly called my assistant to cancel everything. Instead, I found myself driving west out of Austin, the pottery vessel secured beside me, questions churning in my mind. 3 hours later, dust coating my car, I followed the GPS down an unmarked road into seemingly endless desert. Just as I was beginning to think this was an elaborate mistake, a cluster of white canvas tents appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat like a mirage. As I parked and stepped out into the baking sun, a familiar figure emerged from the largest tent. Alyssa, tanned and leaner than before, her blonde hair now streaked with lighter highlights from the sun. She walked toward me slowly, uncertainty in her usually confident stride. "You came," she said simply. "You sent a broken pot," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Professional curiosity." A smile tugged at her lips. "Just professional? That remains to be seen." Alyssa led me through the archaeological camp, introducing me to her team of graduate students and colleagues. Some gave knowing looks, others were simply grateful to meet the ceramics specialist they'd heard about. "The vessel I sent you is part of a matched set we discovered at the Spanish site," Alyssa explained as we entered her command tent. Maps and photographs covered every surface, along with pottery fragments organized in labeled trays. We found 5 vessels in total, but only one was intact enough to transport. "You brought me all the way to Texas to restore a pot from Spain?" I asked, the professional question masking the personal one beneath it. "Not exactly." She gestured to a table where fragments of what appeared to be pre-Columbian pottery lay arranged in rough formation. "We're comparing manufacturing techniques between Old World and New World ceramics of the same period. My theory is that there are unexpected similarities in firing methods." Despite my emotional confusion, I found myself drawn to the puzzle before me. This was familiar territory, broken things needing careful hands. "These Texas fragments need proper conservation before comparison," I observed, examining a piece. "Amateur field conservation can distort crucial evidence." "Exactly why you're here." She hesitated, then added more softly, "One of many reasons." For the next several hours I lost myself in work, establishing a conservation protocol for her team while Alyssa hovered nearby, occasionally offering archaeological context. The professional dynamic felt safe, a buffer against the unaddressed questions between us. As sunset approached, Alyssa dismissed her team. "There's something else I want to show you." She drove us further into the desert in a dusty field vehicle, finally stopping at what appeared to be abandoned ranch buildings. Inside the main structure, I was stunned to discover a makeshift but well-equipped conservation lab. "I set this up for you," she said, nervously watching my reaction. "If you wanted to stay. To collaborate." "Alyssa," I began, unsure how to respond. "I know I disappeared on you." She leaned against a workbench. The Spanish site was incredible but overwhelming. 16-hour days, no reliable communication, and pressure from the university to produce immediate results. "You could have tried harder," I said, the hurt finally surfacing. "A 5-minute call." "You're right." She met my gaze directly. "I got caught in my work, like I always do. It's what destroyed my last relationship too." She stepped closer. "But I never stopped thinking about you, about us." "There is no us," I reminded her. "There were a few incredible days at a retreat, and then nothing. That's why I created this." She gestured around the lab. "To show you I'm serious. This project has funding for 2 years. I want you as official conservation partner." The professional opportunity was extraordinary. Guaranteed work, academic publications, and access to rare ceramic artifacts. But the emotional stakes felt too high. "And when this project ends?" I asked. "We just go our separate ways again?" "What if we didn't have to?" Before I could respond, her team arrived for the evening briefing she'd scheduled. The interruption gave me space to breathe, to consider what she was really offering. During dinner around the campfire, I watched Alyssa in her element, passionate, articulate, respected by her colleagues. So different from the vulnerable woman I'd known at the retreat, yet fundamentally the same. Later, she walked me to my assigned tent at the edge of camp. "Think about it," she said. "The project, I mean." "Just the project?" I asked, testing. Her eyes reflected the distant campfire as she stepped closer. "Not just the project." The kiss was tentative at first, seeking permission. When I responded, it deepened into something hungry and honest, an apology, a question, a promise. Her hands tangled in my hair as mine found her waist, pulling her closer. "I missed you," she whispered against my lips. More than I knew I could miss someone. Inside my tent, illuminated only by a battery lantern, we rediscovered each other with desperate intensity. Every touch carried months of longing, every whispered word an answer to silence. Her body remembered mine, knew exactly how to move, where to touch, when to slow down or quicken. "Stay," she breathed against my neck as we lay tangled together afterward. "Not just for tonight." The next morning, we presented our initial findings to representatives from both universities funding the project. Alyssa's archaeological expertise combined with my restoration perspective created a compelling case for continued research. Dr. Torres's conservation methods will preserve evidence that would otherwise be lost, Alyssa told the board confidently. Her participation is essential to the project's success. When the board unanimously approved additional funding, including a dedicated budget line for ceramic conservation, Alyssa squeezed my hand beneath the table. That evening, celebrating with champagne and glass speakers, she asked, "So, will you stay? Partner with me on this?" I traced the rim of my makeshift glass. "It's a 2-year commitment." "I know." "And after?" She set down her drink, taking both my hands in hers. "I'm being considered for a permanent position at the university here in Texas. It would mean settling in Austin." "Where my studio is," I said slowly, the implications sinking in. "Where your studio is," she confirmed, her eyes never leaving mine. "I'm not asking for forever right now. I'm asking for a chance to see where this goes, professionally and personally." Under a vast desert sky filled with more stars than I'd ever seen, I gave her my answer with a kiss that tasted of champagne and possibility. 6 months slip by quickly when every day brings discovery, both archaeological and personal. Alyssa and I established a productive routine, weekdays at the field site or university lab, weekends in my Austin studio handling private commissions. The transition wasn't always smooth. Academic bureaucracy tested my patience. My independent work habits occasionally clashed with Alyssa's team-oriented approach. "You can't just change the conservation protocol without consulting me," she said one evening after I'd modified our technique for particularly fragile sherds. The original method was damaging the surface decoration, I countered. I made a professional judgment call. Our first real argument ended with both of us storming off to opposite ends of the field site, cooling our tempers under the Texas sun. But unlike my relationship with Emma, where conflicts festered into resentment, Alyssa and I developed a pattern of honest confrontation, followed by genuine resolution. I need to trust your expertise, she admitted when we finally reconvened. But I need to be informed. And I need to remember this is a collaboration, not my private studio, I acknowledged. That night, our reconciliation was particularly sweet, both of us more open, more vulnerable for having navigated the conflict. As autumn turned to winter, we began splitting our time between her university apartment and my place, neither quite ready to officially move in together, but increasingly uncomfortable being apart. The in-between state created its own tensions, particularly as we approached decisions about the next phase of research. The Spain site wants us back for spring excavation, Alyssa mentioned casually one morning, watching me carefully over her coffee mug. 3 months minimum. I paused in the midst of packing my conservation kit. Both of us? They've specifically requested you for the ceramic analysis. Her attempt at nonchalance didn't quite hide her anxiety. It would mean closing your studio temporarily. The old Brooke would have immediately calculated the financial implications, the client relationships at risk, the professional disruption. Instead, I found myself considering what it would mean to wake up beside Alyssa every day in an ancient Spanish village, working together on discoveries that might rewrite ceramic history. I'll need to arrange care for my plants, I said finally. Her smile was worth any potential professional sacrifice. One brisk February afternoon, as we catalogued our findings for the first phase publication, Alyssa's department chair appeared at our laboratory door. The committee's decision was unanimous, he announced without preamble. The tenure track position is yours, Alyssa. Congratulations. The celebration that night included not just academic colleagues but my studio assistant, clients who'd become friends, and a surprising number of people who'd come to see us as a unit, not just individuals. To Dr. White and her brilliant conservator partner, one of Alyssa's graduate students toasted, who proved that sometimes broken things find exactly what they need. Later, walking home through downtown Austin, Alyssa suddenly stopped beneath a streetlight. Move in with me, she said, the words coming out in a rush. Not just half your clothes and your favorite coffee mug. Really move in. Your place or mine? I asked, echoing our exchange from months ago. Neither. Somewhere new. Ours. 2 weeks before our scheduled departure for Spain, I stood in the empty studio space attached to the craftsman bungalow we'd just signed a lease on. Sunlight streamed through windows that would soon overlook both my restoration workbenches and Alyssa's research desk. It's perfect, I said, imagining the possibilities. Almost perfect, Alyssa replied, wrapping her arms around me from behind. It needs one more thing. She stepped away, retrieving something from her bag, the pottery fragment we'd found together by the stream during the retreat. Now it was mounted in a custom frame with the coordinates engraved on a small brass plaque. Our first collaboration, she said, handing it to me. Where everything started. Not quite everything, I corrected, thinking of all that had happened since, but definitely where we began. On our last night before flying to Spain, we hosted a small reception for clients and colleagues in our new combined space, Torres and White Conservation Archaeology Consultancy. The brass sign had been Alyssa's surprise. A declaration that what we'd built was both professional and personal, both business and family. As our guests admired the seamless blend of my restoration equipment with her archaeological reference collection, I found myself standing before the framed pottery fragment, contemplating its jagged edges and incomplete form. Having second thoughts? Alyssa asked, appearing at my side. The opposite, I said, turning to face the woman who had so unexpectedly transformed my life. I was just thinking that sometimes the most beautiful restorations aren't the ones that make something look new again. No? She raised an eyebrow, handing me a glass of champagne. The most beautiful ones honor the breaks, the history, the journey of the piece. I touched the frame gently. They make something entirely new from what was broken. Alyssa's smile held both understanding and promise as she clinked her glass against mine. To beautiful restorations, she said softly, and to whatever we create next.